Welcome to the Korea Pro Podcast, your weekly guide to understanding the most pressing and complicated developments shaping South Korea. We're your hosts, Jeongmin Kim,
John Lei,
and Joon Ha Park of Korea Pro.
Go beyond headlines as we explain not just what happened, but also what really matters and why it matters.
If you monitor South Korea for work or just trying to keep up, you're in the right place.
This is the Korea Pro Podcast.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of the Korea Pro Podcast. It is now Thursday. It is a little bit after 5 p.m., and you get no points for guessing what today's main topic is going to be about.
This is a tariff special episode. We need to go into every details that we are seeing so far as of 5 p.m., although there might be more briefing from South Korean side. But we do need to go into what the U.S. side said and the South Korean side said separately, okay? So let's start with what Trump initially announced.
All right, so at around 7:30 a.m. South Korea time, Donald Trump posted a Truth Social post where he, like with the Europeans and the Japanese, said that we reached a historic trade deal with South Korea. South Korea will invest $350 billion in the U.S. And so in return for that, the U.S. would impose a 15% tariff on South Korean imports, not the 25%, which puts us at parity with the Japanese and the Europeans.
What about the other stuff that is not reciprocal tariff?
Well, that's Sector 232 tariffs, and now that involves automobiles, steel, aluminum, and this will likely get expanded in the next 2 weeks. The U.S. Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, said that in the next 2 weeks, they plan to expand sectoral tariffs to include semiconductors as well.
But for the Korean cars, the tariff went down to 15%
To
as well?
15%, yes.
Well,
it's not as
was
low.
It initially?
It was initially set at 50%. And so, yes, it's definitely lower than 50, and so
Right.
that's great, but it's still higher than what the Japanese have been charged. The Japanese are going to be charged with 13.5% tariffs.
And the next 2 weeks window will be very important to monitor the U.S.-South Korea relations because there apparently will be a summit between Jeongmin and Trump as well, according to Trump, right? And that sort of overlaps with the 2 weeks window you just mentioned as well.
Exactly.
Also, in August, there are a lot of alliance-related events already scheduled, including the preliminary drills for the Ulchi Freedom Shield, which is probably going to be August 12th, right? So there's a lot of moving things right now, but let's go into the investment part of what Trump mentioned. What are these investments exactly?
Well, within the $350 billion figure, what's going to happen is that $150 billion will be invested in shipbuilding. And shipbuilding cooperation, we've already mentioned this several times, the U.S. wants South Korean cooperation regarding that.
And MRO as well.
MRO is definitely part of it. But not included in that is another $100 billion will be spent on purchasing American energy products like LNG, liquefied natural gas.
Before we move on to energy-related deal, among the $350 billion deal, what are the things aside from the shipbuilding? I see semiconductors as well.
Apparently, there's going to be investments made in the U.S. semiconductor industry as well as possibly automobiles and batteries. And these
nuclear power plants
and
as
nuclear
well,
power plants.
And bio.
But we're not quite sure how this is all going to be divided because this agreement was not a binding agreement. Unlike the Chorus US FTA agreement, there was no legislative agenda. There was no debates between Congress and the National Assembly. It was just a handshake, basically, and memoranda that was not made public.
So, but there was something in writing, do you know?
The South Korean government said that there is a memorandum, but it is not yet made public, and we're not sure if it will ever be made public.
Okay, so it's premature to call it a agreement or a deal like Trump put it, probably.
None of these agreements are actual binding stuff.
So it was
right
a
now.
handshake.
Pretty much, yes.
It was a handshake. Okay. Then now let's move on to LNG. What was the thing that Trump said about that?
$100 billion to purchase American energy products, mostly LNG. And sure, that's great. South Korea needs LNG. South Korea has been importing LNG from the Middle East, especially Qatar, for a long time. And what the South Korean government's position is that all South Korea needs to do is just shift some of the imports from the Middle East to the United States.
It doesn't work that way.
Well, we're not quite sure if it's feasible at all. And we have to keep in mind that South Korea is not the only country that has pledged to buy American LNG.
Europe.
The Europeans said on Monday that they're going to invest $750 billion to purchase American energy sources for the next 3 years. That's $250 billion a year. Now, this matters a great deal because in order to meet those kinds of demands, there has to be production. But the law of economics says when supply goes up, prices go down.
But it's Trump that we are talking about. Like, couldn't he just think of a way to make a state intervention to make sure that the prices don't go down?
Even Trump doesn't have a Harry Potter magic wand and set global energy prices. The United States might be the world's largest oil producer in the world right now, but it's not the only big kid on the block. There's also Russia. There's also Saudi Arabia. So while Donald Trump could say they're going to subsidize American oil producers if the prices go down too much and businesses start to go under, that's one thing that he can do, but it doesn't change the fundamental market principles.
What is an international system that governs these regulations or limitations when it comes to changes of oil prices right now?
When it comes to oil production, there is no set world government. What happens is that countries, especially OPEC nations, they'll get together and they'll have an agreement as to whether to expand or cut oil production.
Right.
And when those decisions get made, they will immediately get reflected in stock markets. And the Brent crude oil prices, that's all determined by production and supply and demand, of course.
Yeah.
But when all of these countries, when the Europeans, the Japanese, and the Koreans are all saying, we're going to line up for American oil, production, supply, demand.
Yeah. So we're trying to dumb this down a lot because it's very confusing and complicated, but some parts are already dumb, actually. It's not just the Trump says investment. South Korea will invest this money for American industries. But what does this mean? Investment does this mean a cash flow into America or companies moving into America? What does this mean?
We don't know.
So that's the thing, right?
This is not a treaty. Again, these are just handshakes and internal memos that doesn't get published for anyone to see besides the people who were actually in the room. So Howard Lutnick was saying that the South Koreans will invest $350 billion in the U.S. to God knows how or where or how much. And he said that and 90% of the profits will go to the Americans, which is exactly the same thing what Trump said about the Japanese investments, mind you. And so,
which kind of sounded like Japan might get something back later.
So we have to go back to what the Japanese trade minister was saying in order to have some kind of context.
Yeah.
What the Japanese trade minister said was that among that investments that the Japanese are going to make, about $550 billion, only 1 or 2% would actually be cash investments into the United States, and the rest would all be in the form of loans. Now, again,
that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, and because the United States is saying something, Japan saying another, and South Korea saying another, this is anyone's game to interpret.
Right. So we do not know if it's similar to Japan so far.
It's anyone's guess.
Okay, then we have to wait a little bit to see details of that. Let's move on to other aspects of what Trump announced before we move on to how South Korea framed this for South Korean public. Trump mentioned agriculture. This is a very, very thorny, sensitive issue in South Korea since early 2000s. And agricultural organizations have been doing an all-night protest in front of the U.S. Embassy yesterday. So what did Trump exactly say?
This was the biggest divergence between the American and South Korean narratives. Going back to that Truth Social post, Trump used the word agriculture. He didn't say rice or beef. He said that South Korea would import more American agriculture.
Agriculture.
Yeah.
Just agriculture.
That was the only word that he used. He did not say rice or beef or wheat or corn. He just used the word agriculture. In fact, he said cars, trucks, agriculture. But as soon as the reporters were asking the presidential office as to what this means, the South Korean side was saying, we are not going to open up more access to rice and beef. And so the United States is saying one thing and South Korea is saying something very different altogether when it comes to this particular topic.
Yeah, because the U.S. side said that it's going to be completely open market in car, trucks, and agriculture. But South Korean presidential office later in the day said that rice and beef are not included.
Yep.
Then let's move on to the most favored nations issue. The U.S. also said that when it comes to upcoming semiconductor and pharmaceutical related tariff, U.S. will get a most favored nation status. What does this mean?
I have no idea. Right now, when we look at the free trade agreement, the thing that we've had for years now, both countries already have most favored nation status for each other. But this, again, FTAs don't mean squat anymore. And because what Donald Trump is saying is not at all legally binding, whatever he says is anyone's guess.
Also, when it comes to many things that he lists out, some of them are not mutually exclusive because he says American products will all get no tariffs.
Which has already been the case.
And when South Koreans hear 최애국대우, the most favored nations, this term, even when this is the case with the FTA already being in place, this has historical connotations to it, right? When not South Korea, but Joseon Dynasty, when it first opened up, certain Western countries got the most favored nation status, which South Koreans do remember as a very shameful history.
Well, yes, there is that shameful...
When optics is like this.
Sure. Now, there is that shameful history, but the whole most favored nation status thing, that phrase alone by itself doesn't have any shameful connotations.
Yeah.
It's been a part of diplomacy for as long as diplomacy has been around.
I mean, in current, or until yesterday, international system, that was the norm.
That was the norm, but now it means whatever Trump wants it to mean.
Okay, then now let's shift to how South Koreans frame this. We saw the President Lee version right after Trump's version. What did Lee focus on when he was announcing this?
The president himself, he wrote a Facebook post.
Of
We saw
course.
Truth Social in the United States.
Yeah.
We see Facebook here in
Tit for
Korea.
tat.
And the Facebook post was very generic.
Mm-hmm.
The post was saying that we've overcome the worst, and so now we can finally move on, start to improve relations. Oh, and also concurrently at the same time, Pete Hegseth finally called. And
An Gyubek.
An Gyubek. And finally, the defense ministers had a phone call. Well, maybe Rubio will be next, who knows?
Ooh.
And so it was a very generic sort of statement about how the alliance is strong, about how both countries will just strengthen their relations.
And how the uncertainty is now gone.
Yeah, well, dream on. Uncertainty gone with Trump in the White House.
For 12 hours, maybe. He also mentioned that, relatively speaking, it's similar to competing nations or major powers around the world, like the number that he got. I think he tried to emphasize that, the 15% bid.
It's parity, yeah. Now, compared to, say, Indonesia, which is getting 19, and as well as the Philippines, which also got 19, yeah, 15% is better, but, 15 still higher than, 0.
Yeah. And most importantly, the way that he framed the fund, the investment, this was expected, but he framed it like through this fund, the sectors that South Koreans have competitive edge on, including shipbuilding, semiconductor, the batteries, bio, and energy. This fund will help South Korean companies to more proactively enter U.S. market. Is this true?
In a manner of speaking. So with this money, again, tariffs have been reduced, and the United States will say, well, we wanted you to come in here with shipbuilding cooperation anyway. And yes, it will be easier for South Korean companies to go into the US and say, we're going to invest here, we're going to invest there, we're going to help you produce this and that. But again, we need to talk about economic realities. Just because you have, okay, you know how in the 16th century when Spain first arrived in the Americas?
I knew you would say this.
When the Spanish conquistadors first arrived in the Americas, what they did was like, ooh, new world. There's all these goodies like timber and animals and everything. But instead of taking any of that, they took the gold back. What happened was inflation. This is something like what we're seeing in the United States right now. They're attracting a lot of a lot of foreign investments. A lot of cash is presumably coming in one form or another. But that doesn't change the economic realities on the ground. Just because we invest all this money in shipbuilding doesn't mean that, there's got to be suddenly 1 million American workers who can start working in shipyards. It doesn't suddenly mean that the Jones Act will disappear one day. Economic realities and political realities are still not yet changed. We don't know just because if South Korea will have easier access to enter the market, that South Korean businesses will be able to turn a profit out of this.
So both leaders are speaking
out of their ass? Yes.
on symbolic level rather than actual economic realities.
Yeah. Now let's move on to the Q&A session that the Presidential Office Chief of Staff of Policy Kim Yong-bum had given to reporters earlier today, right after the announcement was made.
And like you mentioned, it was pretty honest about a lot of things that were asked. But frank, but not detailed, because we could see that from South Korea's point of view, it was still confusing even after a deal, right? The first thing that was asked was about, of course, the summit, and the dates are not clear. There were questions from reporters whether defense cost sharing related stuff were mentioned during the tariff negotiation.
And he said no.
He said no. He said that it was Lutnick that led the main debate. It was mostly about trade, and the security-related issue will be discussed during the summit between Lee and Trump. So we have to keep an eye on that. By the way, the summit, if it does happen, it might open up maybe a bit of a less pressure for Lee to finally say yes to going to the military parade. It does not mean that
the military parade in Beijing.
In Beijing, it does not mean that it removes the risks that comes from going to a Chinese military parade against fascism.
That cost is still going to be there, and that's domestically. But sure, you're right. If he does meet with Trump first, he might have less pressure not, to go.
One variable gone.
Sure. Yeah. But who knows, really? Yeah.
And then, of course, he received a lot of questions about agriculture, right? Reporters kept asking, are you sure that rice and beef are not part of it? And then Kim said, yes, they're not part of it.
Very emphatically. And he also did say that there was a chance that maybe the American and Korean negotiators might have, raised their voices at each other.
Yeah, and also he mentioned that the South Korean officials tried to stop the U.S. From pressuring South Korea to additionally open market for agricultural products, considering the historical political sensitivities of that.
And this was a little bizarre because, yeah, sure, people are going to get heated in these discussions and they will yell at each other. But that's not the sort of thing that you typically advertise.
Yeah. Also, like that was one of the moments that we could see the confusion and frustration coming from South Korean officials. It was a little symptom that we see. And then when it comes to the auto tariff, now that there is a 15%, and the reporters asked, does this mean that FTA is gone when it comes to auto?
Pretty much it's gone, yeah.
And then Kim said that from the South Korean side, until the end, the South Korean side wanted 12.5%.
To reach parity with Japan, which we didn't get.
So he said that that's 아쉬워. It's too bad. And regrettable. And there was another sensitive issue that a lot of South Korean companies and multinational companies in South Korea have been keeping an eye on: platform law. The reporters asked whether the online platform law or AI semiconductor-related debate was included into the tariff. But what Kim said was, in the initial stage of the negotiation, it was mentioned, but in the final negotiation table, it was not. And then the reporters lastly questioned about the LNG. Why? So the question was, Trump mentioned the LNG purchase, but South Korean side announcement did not mention this, and they were asking why. And then the presidential office gave sort of a very generic response saying, this is not really new.
And for further analysis as to the different kinds of risks that this really all entails, I just wrote an analysis which you will be able to read by the time that you're listening to this, so please check it out on koreapro.org.
Looking to stay informed about South Korea's fast-evolving political, business and cultural landscape? Join us on Korea Pro, the go-to resource for in-depth analysis expertly curated by top-tier professionals. And now you can pick the membership level that best suits your needs, thanks to our new subscription packages. Starting at just $199 annually, you can access daily analysis and our weekly podcast. Or try our premium membership package, which offers additional perks such as executive briefings, monthly reports and forecasts, networking receptions and event opportunities, as well as much, much more. To find the best fit for you, just head to signup.koreapro.org and become a member today.
Week ahead. What's up next week? Because August 1st has been one of the most important deadlines that we kept mentioning throughout the month.
Well, I'm looking forward to never having to say the word tariff again, and I'll be very happy. No, of course not. This is going to be an ongoing thing.
It's very wishful thinking.
Yeah, we will never be done with this topic. Now, next week, who knows? Donald Trump might just change his mind. He'll say, "Who signed this terrible deal? We're going to have to change it," and we'll be back at square one. Who knows?
And most of the diplomatic news and trade-related news focus right now is on the implications and the follow-up regarding tariff. So we don't have anything more to add to that. But for next week, this is slightly NK News side, but also has South Korea military-related implications. There was one body of a North Korean man found near the inter-Korean border. And next week, South Koreans want to repatriate that through UNC at Panmunjom. Good
But the
luck
North
with
Koreans
that.
have not responded.
They have not responded. So keep an eye on that. And the usual end of month and early month economic data and business sentiment data are all out. So if you want to check it out, visit koreapro.org.
And all of this information will be sent to your email inbox by 2 p.m. on Monday afternoon. So if you'd like to know more, please subscribe. Have a good weekend, everyone.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in.
If you want to know more, sign up for our daily executive briefings. We'll brief you on all you need to know from the past 24 hours and why it matters, delivered to your inbox every morning.
If you want to stay ahead of the curve, sign up for Korea Pro to get a full package of insights, from daily expert analysis to profiles, month in review, week ahead, and more.
And until next time, I'm Jeongmin Kim.
I'm Joon Ha Park.
And I'm John Lee, and we'll see you next time on the Korea Pro Podcast.